City TV Vancouver is a proud supporter of Pride. Happening tonight in Vancouver.
You will have 5 to 10 people at least in the store, but now probably 5 people a day.
It's a view many businesses in the area don't want to get used to. Cruise ships could permanently skip Vancouver and Victoria en route to Alaska. What businesses say about another potential blow that could close their doors for good.
A solemn day of devotion and reflection as mosques across Canada hold their first Friday prayer since the tragedy in London, Ontario.
This is how we heal. Come together, see each other, cry together.
Instead of saying, okay, all Canadians might be fully vaccinated by the end of September, hey, if everything goes well, I'm optimistic, maybe it'll be sooner.
Cautious optimism for a 2-dose summer while Canada announces it will share up to 100 million doses of vaccines with other countries.
This is City News Everywhere.
A good evening. BC has crossed another milestone in the battle against COVID-19. 75.1% of all adults have had their first dose of a vaccine. There are 180 new cases of the virus tonight, and 1 more person has died in the last day. 162 people are currently in hospital, and of those, 45 are in intensive care. Premier John Horgan, Health Minister Adrian Dix, and Provincial Health Officer Dr. Bonnie Henry will speak on Monday about moving into Phase 2 of the province's restart plan next week. Just over 300,000 doses of Johnson & Johnson's vaccine shipped to Canada earlier this year will not be released. Health Canada with the decision coming down late this afternoon after they had quarantined the shipment when concerns surfaced regarding potential contamination at the manufacturing site in the U.S. The agency says they were unable to determine if the shipment met their standards and that plans are already in place for an on-site inspection this summer for future shipments. Until then, they say they will not be accepting any product or ingredients made at the site.
You will have 5 to 10 people at least in the store, but now probably 5 people a day.
A view from the Port of Vancouver without the cruise ships. It's not what businesses want to see, and there are worries they won't come back as the U.S. considers having ships bypass Vancouver and Victoria en route to Alaska. 3 bills have been tabled in the U.S. Senate that would scrap a long-standing requirement for American cruise ships to dock at a foreign port when traveling between 2 U.S. ports. Rules were relaxed last May when countries like Canada banned international cruise ships from entering the country. This latest move would be another massive blow to BC's already struggling tourism industry. If you walk along Gastown's cobblestone sidewalks, you'll notice there's plenty of room, and people like Christian Turo are missing the tourists. On a slow day, he could still make $250 selling his art.
Pretty slow. There's pretty dead. And it's just like the cruise ships are a big part of the traffic down here, and there's not really that much. It's all locals, right?
This Vancouver retailer has been in business for 25 years and was expecting a big bounce back.
We started to prepare last month because the vaccine rollout is very good in Canada, and we're expecting to open, to everywhere, the tourists in the summer. However, it's not that easy to just start right away, not just because the customer base, but also the supply, for art pieces.
With all the uncertainty, owners aren't sure if they should stock up. Just a walk around the block shows blowout sale after blowout sale at souvenir shops, while this art gallery says it's planning on relocating to North Vancouver, calling it a bustling and up-and-coming community. BC Premier John Horgan notes that 1 million passengers a year disembarked in Vancouver pre-pandemic, with over 700,000 stopping in Victoria. And he doesn't think the lure of BC will go away.
But I think the traveling public will be voting with their feet. And the notion of getting on a cruise ship in San Francisco or Los Angeles, stopping in a foreign country like Canada, where the dollar's worth a little bit more, where you've got different people on your money, a whole bunch of different cultural changes that are distinctions rather between Canada and the United States is compelling for the cruise ship industry.
So the Premier should have looked at the potential risk of losing any of the cruise industry along the coast of British Columbia. He didn't. He dismissed it. He said it would never happen. He called it a blip. And now we are facing the potential of significant economic damage to our province.
Some locals want the province to intervene. Others feel the bills could do damage beyond just the streets of Gastown.
I do hope our government can put some effort to push them come through Vancouver.
Yeah, it would suck. I think it would just ruin Vancouver.
In Vancouver, Crystal Ladaris, City News.
Well, you'll soon be getting another check in the mail from ICBC. The public insurer says its bottom line is doing better because of fewer claims, likely because fewer of us are driving. It's sending out a second round of rebates beginning next month. Customers who had active policies from last October 1st to March 31st will get about 11% back from the premiums they paid during that time. They're expected to average about $120.
People will start to see their rebate in mid-July. It will come in one of two ways. So if, for example, you paid by credit card, it will be a refund on your credit card. If you paid by check or cash, it will be in the form of a check. And so people should start to see that from mid-July onwards.
A scary situation for people who live in an apartment building in downtown Vancouver. Flames broke out inside a 14th floor suite at Thurlow and Comox Streets. This was in the West End last night. Now, at one point, you could see the smoke from across the city. Luckily, the fire hall is just a few blocks away, so emergency crews were on scene quite fast. A ladder truck sprayed the side of the building to prevent the flames from spreading. No one was home when the fire started, and no one was hurt. The cause is not believed to be suspicious. Upgrades are coming to the counterflow system on the Lionsgate Bridge. Starting Monday, crews will begin installing new signal heads along the bridge deck and the Stanley Park Causeway with LED lane control signals. Traffic control devices in the causeway will be replaced, and new software to manage the counterflow system will be installed. In order to perform this work, overnight lane closures will be needed from 11 o'clock at night until 6 o'clock in the morning. The project is expected to cost nearly $5 million, and work should be finished in mid-November. About 60,000 drivers cross the Lionsgate Bridge every day. Emotional moments at the Vancouver Art Gallery, where a vigil is taking place to remember the London, Ontario family victims of a horrific attack. Coming up, we'll hear from the organizers, from some attendees, and others who say they just wanted to help.
For the first time in months, worshippers were allowed inside mosques in Ontario today, though following what police have called the hate-motivated mass murder of a family in London less than a week ago, today's sermons took on a much more solemn tone as Muslims across Canada came together in prayer. The sacred day of worship took on even more meaning today in Toronto, Vancouver, and across the country. The grieving was also evident today inside the London Muslim Mosque, the spiritual home of the Assel family, who, according to investigators, were targeted and killed on Sunday because of their Islamic faith.
You can feel this cloud of grief hanging over the community. You can see people crying today in the congregation, and many more will come and cry, because this is how we heal. Come together, see each other, cry together. Ontario's Lieutenant Governor made the pilgrimage to London today for afternoon prayers, tying a ribbon on the playground fence at the mosque, a symbol of unity as this community bands together against racism.
I don't know why it is that we are afraid of people who are different. Why that drives us apart instead of driving us together. And so I think we have to have some of those respectful conversations, but mostly we need to move beyond talking to take real action.
Back in Toronto, they also marched along Danforth Avenue, a show of solidarity against hate. Tonight in London, a larger walk is taking place, beginning at the scene of the tragic incident and finishing at the mosque. Along with prayer, many are calling for action, but not before there's a wider understanding of how pervasive racism is in our communities.
We are actually several steps behind where we needed to be already. So before we can demand action, we have to catch up by naming the problem.
Dr. Javeed Sukera was a family friend of the Afzals. He's also a child psychiatrist and the chair of the London Police Service Board.
Even today, there's discourse out there that says that they are more offended at the suggestion that there can be racism in our midst than racism itself.
Tomorrow will be another difficult day for Muslims across Canada, as the 4 victims, 3 generations of the same family, are buried. A public service will be held, as well as a private burial.
It's the last time that they will see this family. So that moment before the burial, we want it to be private for them as a special moment that they would have. Their grieving is going to continue. That's not going to be the end of it, but we're hoping that will be that will give them a little bit of comfort and closure.
As for the public service, it will be taking place tomorrow at 1:30 at the Islamic Centre of Southwestern Ontario. In London, I'm Adrian Gobriel for City News.
We are live in Surrey tonight, where a vigil is going to get underway in Holland Park at the top of the hour to pay tribute to the family members killed, of course, in London, Ontario. Tonight's event is being hosted by the Vancouver chapter of the Committee of Progressive Pakistani Canadians, and it is open to everyone. There will be a number of guest speakers, and anyone attending is asked to follow social distancing guidelines. We'll bring you more tonight on City News at 11. People in Vancouver are trying to come to grips with what happened in London, Ontario, as a vigil takes place at the Vancouver Art Gallery. People have been praying, sharing their own stories of hate and hope for a better world. The vigil is in solidarity with the 4 family members killed Sunday, representing 3 generations, and a 5th member, a 9-year-old boy who is still in hospital. Summer Sultan is based in Vancouver and is a family friend. She says the boy is aware of what's going on.
He knows what's happening. He will be staying in London with extended members of the Afzal family. That is all I can reveal.
She says the family's funeral is set to take place on Saturday, but the lone survivor's pain will continue beyond that.
Faiz is 9. Think about what impression and trauma he has to now carry with him from Sunday forward about being Canadian. Just think about that. This is his Canada. This is our Canada, and it's a pretty messed up Canada.
For the local organizers of this event, they say they needed to do something. Noor Fadel is one of them and says while Vancouver is on the other side of the country, they hope the family feels the support.
I think we thought like 50 people would show up at most. So to see the crowd out today, it's absolutely heartwarming because honestly our intentions for this is really just to get that community together. We've already had like a difficult month, a difficult week, knowing what's going on with the Indigenous community, knowing with the Asian crime that's really just the Asian hate crime like increasing tremendously. And you know, this story now with Islamophobia, and it's tragic. It's absolutely tragic.
She says the responsibility falls on members of the community, especially the politicians who are supposed to represent the people.
I mean, it's not a surprise. This is something where I'm like, we were expecting it. We were waiting for the next headline. We just didn't think it would have been this soon with everything else going on as well.
In Vancouver, Ria Renouf, City News. Well, we could soon be getting some new insight into one of the most high-profile unsolved murder cases in Canada. The Supreme Court says files related to the killings of Barry and Honey Sherman will be unsealed and open to the public. The billionaire couple was found dead inside their Toronto home in December of 2017, but the case has gone cold since. The court ruling states that there is sufficient public interest to unlock the files. Barry Sherman was the head of pharmaceutical giant Apotex, and the couple were also well-known philanthropists. 7 BC mayors have added their support for Vancouver's application to decriminalize small amounts of illicit drugs, and they say it's time Ottawa stepped up. The mayors say the ongoing opioid crisis has harsh effects in their cities, and decriminalization could encourage users to seek help. Vancouver has applied to Health Canada for decriminalization of simple possession of 15 different drugs. It has the support of a broad coalition, including Vancouver Police, the province, chief coroner, and provincial health officer. The mayors of Victoria, Nanaimo, Saanich, Kamloops, New Westminster, Burnaby, and Port Coquitlam say the federal government must also support Vancouver's application.
Instead of saying, okay, all Canadians might be fully vaccinated by the end of September, hey, if everything goes well, I'm optimistic, maybe it'll be sooner.
Cautious optimism from Canada's Deputy Chief Public Health Officer that a 2-dose fall may become a 2-dose summer as Canada ramps up its vaccine rollout. The encouraging news comes as Canada announces it will share up to 100 million doses of vaccines with other countries.
I think we can walk and chew gum at the same time.
The news of vaccine sharing coming from Canada's High Commissioner to the UK, Ralph Goodale. Officials trying to reassure Canadians it's a safe move.
I want to just assure you that it will not impact our objective of fully vaccinating all Canadians by the end of September.
That September goal looking more and more attainable as shipments hit record highs. Next week alone, Canada is expected to receive 9.5 million doses of vaccines. In Ottawa, Nigel Newlove, City News.
This week in science, we're talking all about Venus, which is finally getting some long overdue attention. Now, you've probably heard of all of those missions we've been sending up to Mars lately, but of the 4 rocky planets in the solar system, Venus is the one we know the least about. We do know it's pretty hellish there. Thick clouds of sulfuric acid, surface temperatures hot enough to melt lead, and air pressures 90 times that of Earth. That all makes it pretty hard to study. The first Russian landers could only send back a few measurements from the surface before they were crushed like pop cans. And aside from a couple of flybys, NASA hasn't sent anything to Venus since the Magellan orbiter crash-landed there in 1994. But interest in the planet got a huge boost last year when scientists in the UK claimed to have detected phosphine gas in Venus's atmosphere. And there's not really a good reason why it should be there, except if there were living things producing it. Think microorganisms floating around in those Venus clouds. Now, there's a lot of uncertainty surrounding that phosphine finding, but regardless, now everybody's going. Europe is planning a mission, same with India, Russia, private company called Rocket Lab, and finally NASA, which is planning to send 2 missions to Venus before the decade is out. Now, the first is Da Vinci Plus, that will take precise measurements of the planet's atmosphere, and Veritas, which will chart a 3D map of the surface. Between them, we should find out if Venus ever had an ocean, if it has plate tectonics, volcanoes, earthquakes, and maybe the most important one for us, why its atmosphere is the way it is. Venus, after all, could have been a lot like Earth before a runaway greenhouse effect turned it into a hellscape. And with this planet heating up, that makes Venus kind of a cautionary tale, one worth knowing down to the very last detail. And an added science side benefit here, we know there are lots of planets just like Venus outside of the solar system. So learning about the one we have nearby will teach us about them too. With This Week in Science on City News, I'm News 1130's Curtis Doring.
Vancouver's news is always available on the radio at News 1130 or online anytime at citynews1130.com. Your next edition of City News is tonight at 11. Thanks so much for watching. Have a great night.